So, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar this afternoon. We are looking at effective work with schools to prepare our learners for adulthood. This is a really big agenda for us, as we know, and I am very pleased to welcome Michelle and Deborah from Whole School Send, and more from them in a little while. My name is Elaine Dale from City College Norwich and one of the Centres for Excellence. Today, we'll look at the agenda in just a moment, but what I do want to do is just to let you know that we have still got plenty of activities on our gateway with resources. We are undertaking college reviews this year, so if you want to get in touch and have a peer review with us, then do let us know. And as part of our offer with Education Training Foundation, we have joined with Nason and Whole School Send as part of our universal services. I really do urge you to go and have a look at their resources on the Nason a site and Whole School Send page. We've got an awful lot of resources, as well as some wonderful online learning with that final link there. There are 20 units altogether. The units 1 to 3 have already been created and are ready and live for staff to access. These are funded by the Department for Education, so currently free of charge for us all. And the units are at 20 minutes long, so just really bite-sized, really effective learning. So I do urge you to go and have a look at those and get in touch if you want to undertake a college review with us. Today we're going to focus, and it's totally around preparation for adulthood. We're going to look at the national landscape with a focus on from a college's perspective, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues and what that means for them from a school's focus, and then what we need to do as far as working effectively together with a discussion. So I'm going to open the floor up for some questions, and then I really want us to think about actually what is it that we've got to do to take away from that, so a pledge at the end of it. So as far as the national landscape goes, we know from the reflections from the Send Review and the Green Paper, as I said to you, it's a really big focus for us, and we know that the SEND system isn't fully effective, and that the experience for children and young people and their families was not working, and so the preparation for adulthood was a really keen focus. Outcomes for young people wasn't consistent, and it was different depending on where you were in the country, and despite investment and systems, that there wasn't the financial stability. So we know that we've had a review around that, about the right support, right place, right time, and there's ongoing work on that. I know the Department for Education are working behind the scenes on the national standards and what that looks like. So more work on that. And as we navigate our way through each of these themes and areas, preparation for adulthood being a huge part of that, we will influence this and the sector moving forward. For us, I think a big focus and influence for the FE sector, and I think for us all to be aware, is the local skills improvement plans following the Act there, which is in the right hand side, and we know that we've all got a role to play here. So there's a question there about the FE sector has a leading role to play in delivering the skills and enabling innovation. So there's a lot for us to think about in our planning, which is actually at the forefront of our minds at the moment with planning our curriculum. What we do know is that quite a lot of our young people with have a learning difficulty and disability within the FE sector. So 16.44% have actually shared that and declared that with us. I bet you that figure's a lot higher when we look at that. And in our college, actually, if we look at low-level SEND that goes on, it's probably a lot higher than that, around about sort of 33-35%. But what we do know is that when we look at those that sustain positive destinations, from last year's data, it's 68% complete and achieve with their destinations that are either progress or go into employment. 68%. So that's really, really low for our students with additional needs. And then if we look at the landscape, everyone, when we're thinking about those that have a additional need, um, their earnings are less than those without additional needs. So there's something in there around the local skills improvement plans for all young people within our area, but actually something for us to think about, who have a real focus on additional needs and about what our focus is and what difference we can make with things like transition to employment and supported employment. And we know that this is a big focus for Ofsted at the moment. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because we've really got to think about this. And with our school colleagues on the call today, this just goes to show the focus that we have from where we have a young person with us, the stages we have to move them through very quickly to develop their skills through to employment. So we have a lot of work for the very short time that learners are with us. So when we're thinking about preparation for adulthood from the earliest of years, this was something that was in the reforms, wasn't it, everyone, that we knew about when they were actually saying, well, to prepare them for their earliest of years, we need early identifications of additional needs, and for those children and young people to have high aspirations, but that the workforce is better informed and has knowledge and understanding of schools and post 16 sector, so that we've got the skills to be able to support them from the earliest of years. And then the block at the bottom just talks about actually that preparation for adulthood. So that was really strong about meaningful pathways. And for our school colleagues that are on the webinar today, for us in the FE sector, we really work hard with our pathway planning to make sure that we've got steps through to further education and employment. And I'll show that in just a moment. So we are dedicated and focused on those improved outcomes. But as we can see, there's still a lot of work to do with the previous slides when we're looking at those statistics. So what we need to think about, and I'm going to ask this question to you, I brought it up here. There are 3 points that we need to think about, everyone. And I think this is going to be a question for us to look at later on, these 3 points here. So we need to think about how we ensure provision is sufficient to meet the aspirations and needs. We know we're going into provision mapping at the moment and planning for 23-24 right here, right now. So there's something around that, and the children and young people that are coming to our provision, we need to know about those. So how do we know about those to enable that we can prepare for planning and growth? That's something that we need to know what's happening. And so, from our local authority colleagues that are on the call here today, we need to know about those phase transfer, so we can help them provision map and plan our provision accordingly. And so that we can identify any specific barriers and address these. So that's absolutely critical for us with effective partnership working. So I'm going to come on to those questions later on, but I just wanted to flag those nice and early with you, just so that we can start some discussion. So from a college's perspective, this will be familiar for my FE colleagues on the call. And we had a webinar a little while ago where we looked at this in detail about actually what's working and even better if, when we were looking at information sharing. So that transition in and across to post 16, it's really for us, it's around understanding and having those EHCPs in advance. So we've got that, so information in advance. So we're actually meeting that phase transfer deadline through the consultations. If we meet that 31st of March deadline, that's absolutely fantastic. For the majority of our learners with additional needs and with those with plans, is absolutely critical. We're actually working really well with our local authority and sharing information with common transfer files with our feeder schools. So that's a pilot that's working now, but actually, everyone needs that, where we need early information for those formates, for those that have got low level additional needs. And early destination planning, that's something where we just need to look at the students that are coming in, so that we can plan for their next steps as early on as possible to help with that planning. That then informs really, when we can look at the early destination planning, so we can increase awareness of employment options, because no matter what their pathway is that we really do want to make sure that the majority of our learners and students actually get into employment, so we can support about any disabled student allowance for those that are going off to university, access to work, etc., and increase employer awareness and their responsibilities of learners. So actually, when we're looking at employer training and support around that for next steps. So that was something that we worked on as a group of people, and actually felt that that was really strong. And then the final point around preparation for adulthood was around people and workforce, where many of you that were on the call, we were looking at transition staff. We had some really effective practice where we've got people actually working on who are specifically roles around transition in, through, and out. We felt that all of our learners benefited from improved careers support, and that was really, really strong in the FE sector. But actually, we needed to make sure that all of our career support were specialists in SEND, and that everyone was able to understand SEND for all staff. So that was really critical that there was SEND training for all staff. And strategic post 16 planning in terms of local improvement partnership working, so working with our local enterprise partnerships, when we're thinking about the skills improvement plan, and partnership working with our schools, with our local authority. So it's really important that we've actually got this webinar here today, and bringing in our colleagues from whole school SEND and hearing from their point of view as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing from their views and what I can learn to improve my area of work. So I'm for us, when I'm thinking about preparation for adulthood, working in partnership from a college's perspective, there are some key themes that I would like to talk about here, and I hope my whole school SEND colleagues will take this back. Although I know that Deborah, who's on the call here today, is very well versed with a college programme of study, but I am just going to talk about this right here, right now. But what we do with our programme of studies, we are focused on preparation for adulthood and those 4 outcomes. When we're thinking about that, we're looking at our pathway planning, and I'm going to show some examples of pathway planning in a little while. Partnership working is absolutely critical with the work that we do, and working with our local authority is absolutely essential. And I know I've got colleagues on the call here from Essex, and I know they're really closely aligned with their colleges, because that's absolutely critical. Personalisation is actually making sure that you've got the programme that's right. And I know throughout all of your planning within the FE sector at the moment, you're actually personalising that and thinking about making adjustments. And so for my school colleagues that are on the call today or listening to the webinar afterwards, whatever might be on the website, you need to consider that there might be some adjustments, because there's some individual needs and personalised planning that the FE sector is really skilled at taking that forward, as well as developing the skills of learners really quickly, moving them through a pathway plan so that they're ready for their progression and their next steps. And so if I then show what a programme of study is for my FE colleagues, this is obviously, we know this inside out, but actually it's really quite complex for those from if you're looking at it from a school's perspective and thinking what that might look like. So I've got a couple of slides that actually unpack this a little bit. So we've got a vocational or academic pathway at the top here that it will either follow a qualification route or a RAPA, which is non-accredited, depending on the individual learner. And there might be exams, coursework or assignments to achieve at the end to be able to achieve their qualification. And alongside a program of study, there'll always be maths and English. So that might be at a GCSE level, that might be at a functional skills level, or a student might be exempt depending on their educational needs, but still undertaking maths and English as part of their learning, whether or not it's formalized or not. Also, as part of work experience, we have, as part of a program study, we have work experience. So for some of our learners, they start off, for those with additional needs, internally, working around the college, and then move to external offer. But for the majority of our learners, it's external work experience. And then when we move into our other programs, which I'll come on to in a moment, it's quite a substantial chunk of time, but I'll come on to that in just a moment. But we have enrichment activities as well as part of a program of study with personal development behaviours and attitude. And then alongside their core aim and their program of study, there is the EHCP and their outcomes, as we know, that is absolutely integral and aligned to the vocational academic program. And within that, as many of you know, that they'll have additional aspects to that. Well, they'll be seeing a speech and language therapist, they might be seeing a physiotherapist or occupational therapist alongside their main program of study. If I talk about some of our other programs outside of the entry level and level one, for our main program, we start at level 2, which is at GCSEs, and progress students into level 3s, either through applied generals, A levels or T levels, or apprenticeships. Now the T levels is quite specific and has quite a large chunk of working with an employer as does an apprentice, and you can see the higher levels that we then work through here. And on the right hand side, you can see on the infographic of the different types of technical levels, which is the T levels that are on offer in the majority of sector areas and in the majority of colleges these days. But it's worth checking out with your local college what's on offer and what that might mean. So this just gives an overview as another infographic, but I think really important for our schools colleagues here when we're looking at entry level and when we're talking to parents and carers, they also need some really clear instruction when we're looking at levels and award certificates and diplomas. That can be quite confusing because there's obviously, you've got entry level 1, entry level 2 to 3, and sometimes of our parents carers, they say, oh, we've been on a level 2, and actually realize that it's an entry level rather than a full level 2, which is at a GCSE level. So that's quite, I think, a helpful infographic to understand how it works within the FE sector. So something for you to take away. So for us at our college, and I know that this will be closely aligned to all of you when we're looking at, we always initially assess our learners. We look about where they're actually going when we're initially assessing. Are they a complex learner with additional needs, and what their pathway plan might be through to independent learning and day opportunities. We might be thinking about a vocational pathway to mainstream, or we might be thinking about an employability pathway. I'm not going to run through all of these, but you can just see the routes in what they might take here at each level and the skills that they develop along the way. This is the same when we're looking at from a vocational academic pathway, where we're engaging and identifying the progression routes and the entry points when they're transitioning. It might be that they come in at entry level, or level 1, or progress through from entry through through the levels. But over a course of time, they'll be developing their skills and interest into further learning, or indeed going into employment, which is another route that we actually look at. So for this one in particular is for our entry level provision, and many of you in the FE sector that's on the call today will offer something like this, where there's the transition and engagement. There'll be an enterprise entry into the college. There'll be specific sector skills that you'll develop for our children and young people, and developing those employer skills into a supported internship, and then sometimes out into work or onto our, for us here at the college, it's our supported employment agency with really strong outcomes, with details there on the right hand side. So there's lots really going on within the FE sector as part of a programs of study, and it's worth knowing your local college and FE provider to understand what they actually do offer. I think for us, what's really important, and later on, it'd be really good to bring in Emma and Suzanne on their work and their priorities with their local authority. I think when we're thinking about the whole webinar about actually, it's about collaboration and improving what's in place together. I've been working really effectively with our local authority on the 4 priorities. There on the screen on the right hand side, we've been looking really strongly at our phase transfer and common transfer files pilots, in making sure that we've got all information so we can actually plan really well for our next steps. So I do take responsibility for that, and ownership of that. I've got a part to play in that. I've worked with provision expected at SEND support with our local authority on universal services, so that we can provision map what children have at school to be able to replicate that. So there's a common understanding of what we can then offer a college. So I think that's really important. I've also worked with our parent carer forums locally in Norfolk, and produce some guides here, which are there on the right hand side, which you can download yourself as well and adapt and create something similar within your own area. Planning for FE, so that families understand what it is that they've got to think about. And I think it's important to note at this point that it's about, for us, it's always interesting when parents don't realise that it's not a full-time provision, 5 days a week. Well, it's full-time provision, but it's 3 days a week when you come to college, because it's actually undertaking other preparation for adulthood activities on the other days. So I think there's some things about information of planning to come to college, things that you need to think about, and then a guide specifically for our college with lots of details about actually what kind of support do I get if I have an education, health and care plan. Tell me about assisted transport, that type of thing. So some helpful support, and we did that in co-creation with our parent carer group, as well as working with our local authority on the transition guides here that you can download and have a look. So I think when we're thinking about preparation for adulthood and that transition out, these are really useful. So that's it from an FE perspective. I'm going to hand over now, and whilst Deborah, and if Michelle's on the call, is going to introduce themselves, I'm going to stop sharing and prepare the video in just a moment. So.
Okay, thanks, Elaine. My name's Deborah Dent. I work for NASON on the whole school SEND. As most of you know, that's a national program from the DFE, which is about every teacher, a teacher of SEND. And we've been developing over the last 2 or 3 years a whole range of resources and support for that. I've come on board as the liaison person with further education from this program. My background is that I'm an FE teacher. I taught in FE in London for a long time, but I've also since then worked in a local authority as the PFA lead, and I've worked a lot with schools on developing their relationships with FE and supporting the way that they work. So Michelle, I think you're on the call. Michelle? Well, possibly not. I know Michelle had some commitments this afternoon. She wasn't sure at what time she'd be able to join, but I'll bring her in when she comes. So how are we doing on the video, Elaine?
So I'm just about to share now.
Excellent.
When I grow up, I want to be a builder.
When I grow up, I want to be a woodcarver.
I want to be king.
When I grow up, I want to be an Xbox game designer.
When I grow up, I want to work in a hotel.
When I grow up, I want to be a vet and look after dogs.
I want to be a racing driver.
When I grow up, I want to be a digger driver.
I want to be a professional shopper.
When I grow up, I want to be like Ant and Dare.
I want to be a fashion model. When I grow up, I want to be a vet and look after horses.
I want to be a chef and I want to make pizzas and curries for everyone.
When I grow up, I would like to work in the kennels or cattery. I want to be a theme park maker.
When I grow up, I want to work in McDonald's.
When I grow up, I want to be a scientist.
Wasn't that wonderful, everyone? And just whilst I'm bringing back the next slide, just move that along to bring back Deborah. What I do love about that is that it makes me smile every single time. Hopes, aspirations and ambitions. So it's absolutely wonderful. So I will start resharing again so that Deborah can carry on.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. So this small set of slides is just to try and present some of the thinking that's going on in schools around preparing for adulthood. And I know a lot of you will be working with your schools anyway, so it may well be that you know exactly what's going on. So I hope at the end of this, at the discussion time, we can actually share the practice that's going on in your area as well. But this is just an introduction. So this first slide is really about early years and primary. Pathways begin when children are small, thinking about being independent. And as the second point there says, the DFE has recently announced additional funds for careers guidance in primary schools. So there is now a push to create more interest and understanding of work and employment in primary schools, and encouraging that through a program of employers going in to schools just to present what they do, why they like their job, and to create some interest in employment. And this fits well, I think, with a lot of the surveys that are done with young people with additional needs or with SEND, that when they're asked what their priorities are for adulthood, they say in very large numbers their top priority is getting a job. So this, I think, fits very well into the way that primary schools now are being encouraged that all children should have exposure to more careers education. So if we have a look at the next slide, Elaine. Okay, so moving on to secondary schools, what works to support employment? The emphasis in schools is now being put on careers guidance. And in currently, the legislation says careers guidance must happen in year groups 8 to 13. And there is a move now to extend that to 7 to 13, which was in the recent schools bill, which actually isn't going ahead, but is likely to be rejuvenated. So that means that careers guidance will happen to all year groups in secondary. As you know, the careers guidance is supported by the Careers and Enterprise Council. And you'll hear that word, careers, careers guidance, careers leader, rather than what we used to use, which was IAG. And in lots of ways, that is a pity. I know IAG is still widely used in FE, and that's great. The emphasis, I think, on careers is on that sense of being a worker, and that sense for every school to give the opportunity for young people to meet people in work. So now every school has a careers leader. That's a statutory requirement, and that careers leader must be named on the website. And the purpose of that is so that local colleges, training providers, anyone who wants to work with young people in the careers space, that they can get in touch with the school. So it's a sense of entitlement. Another point, what's happening in a number of schools is that they're developing and using career portals. So GrowFar would be an example, and I think that's used in FE as well, isn't it? That those kinds of portals mean that students can record their experiences and understanding of careers, and they can also look at their own strengths and aptitudes that let them then think about careers. There is a lot of specialist software being sold to schools so that students can develop their careers portfolios and plan. And these, of course, do have a real importance for young people, not only those with an education, health and care plan, but those with SEN support. Local employers are seen as the key way of bringing careers understanding into schools. So the government has set up, and I'm sure the same happens in FE, more structures for employers to be linked with schools and colleges, and that they can add then real life experiences into the local careers advice and guidance. You'll see there that it says all students should have 4 to 6 encounters with FE in years 7 to 11. Encounters is never very clearly defined, but certainly it gives an opportunity there for all young people to understand after 4 encounters exactly what FE can offer them, exactly what the alternatives are to school-based pathways, and the ways in which FE can particularly support those with additional needs. So that's something which most schools now are working towards, and certainly for young people with additional needs, I'm sure they're working with their local colleges in order to bring that in. And then some schools develop additional approaches for those with SEN support. And in talking about that group, it's in secondary schools, it is a larger group than those with education, health and care plans. And it is a group that now is developing, has a lot of students who have quite significant needs and who maybe a few years or a decade ago would have got a plan. Therefore, the complexity of those needs and the kinds of teaching approaches have also changed in secondary schools. So there are students who are working now in units within mainstream schools or within additionally resourced provision, sometimes called ARPs, who have more complex needs. They're not going into special schools, but their parents particularly want a mainstream education. but they do have very significant needs. And one of the things I think it's useful to talk about now is when those students now coming through primary and secondary arrive in FE, how do we talk about those quite significant needs in that SEN support cohort? And that, of course, in schools is a conversation for the careers leader and the SENCOs working together to look at employment pathways, and together they can then have that dialogue with FE. So Elaine, if you just want to do the next one. So the offer for SEND students around employment and employment preparation in schools varies a lot. So there is no, as it were, curriculum, but these are some of the things that that schools would like to have or do have and could work with FE in order to support. So vocational profiling, schools are encouraged to look at vocational profiling for the awareness of students' strengths and aptitudes. And that's really something with the experience and knowledge that's in FE can be invaluable. Work experience and work encounters, likewise, they will offer experiences which sometimes now schools find it difficult to offer to the whole cohort, and they will sometimes offer a particular experience for those who have SEN support. There's an initiative in schools called the initiative for against NEET. So what we'd like to do through Ronnie's risk of NEET indicators is that some students will get a risk of NEET flag, which enables FE to know that there are particular issues there. The sharing of that flag is also something that we sometimes need to discuss. Obviously for EHCPs during secondary, there are annual reviews from year 9 and then 10 and 11 that set out work ambitions and work pathways. For SEND support, with student permission of those over 16, details of need can be shared between school and college. And this is another area that I think it would be useful for us to pick up on. Elaine has already mentioned the way in which schools and colleges can work together, but this can sometimes be a difficulty and a barrier. Strong college and school relationships do obviously help in creating this kind of FE-assisted provision in secondary schools. And within schools, the close liaison between SENCO, careers leads and heads of year is really something that supports their transition policies and their work with FE. So all secondary schools are different, as you will know. So those of you who work with several schools will know that practices differ, and so do the ease of making relationships. So this is just some of the ways in which schools can work with FE and FE with schools. So there's a next slide, Elaine. Yes, a bit more about the employment pathways and school liaison. Adults with SEND as role models, that's one of the things which schools find quite difficult. So young people with additional needs who have been successful in college, have moved out into the world, are in employment, even if that's part-time employment, that's just as valuable. Many young people want to hear about how you get into employment. So where FE can help with role models, that's always very welcome. Obviously, the clear plans support transfer. There's the issue of the students with SEND support who may not self-declare their issues. So they may turn up in your college and you don't actually know anything much about them or their needs. And it takes quite a long time for you to get to know that learner. And in that time, that learner is at risk. So to hear more about how that's being handled in the sector would be really interesting. Programs of study, for picking up on what Elaine said, school colleagues are not always aware of the content and range. as you said, they're complex programs. So in advising young people, it's helpful if they know more about the program of study. And then working together locally in groups, some local authorities and some MATs, which are the academy chains, will have a careers forum or a careers group or something where local schools and FE can work together. And that's proving to be very valuable. And I'm sure that there are LA people here today and FE people who work in those groups. Again, it would be really interesting to hear what you're finding particularly useful and how you're keeping the glue for that kind of group. And in some local areas, a transition protocol may exist, not in all. I mean, this is one of the areas that we feel in Whole School Send that it's really important to tackle an understanding of what those protocols could look like. And school liaison from the college side. Sometimes schools do feel a frustration when they work or their first contact is with a marketing department when they want to talk about individual learners or they want to talk about individual programs. So it's that sense of who do I speak to? Because FE is it's a large organization, you have lots of departments, you have lots of different people with responsibilities. The language as well may be a barrier. So that's another area in which we could make life easier. I think there's, yeah. So I put this up just so that it's a very nice slide, which in very simple terms shows what a plan might look like. That gave some idea of a young person on their way to a job. And I think some in working with schools, something like this that makes the plan look really simple and clear, I think would help from year 9 onwards for some young people to have a model of a plan, but particularly for those with SEN support who don't have a plan, there's very little in the way of formats for them to express what they would like. So something simple like this for young people with SEN support who want to go into college, I think we shouldn't underestimate that it'd be very useful for them too. So just to say that I hope that some of the issues raised there we can bring up in discussion and just have a talk about the good practice that's out there and things that we can pass on through the Whole School Send programme.
Thank you, Deborah. That was really insightful. I have to say, I've been making lots of notes. There's lots of things I didn't know, so it just goes to show, doesn't it, that it's good to talk and good to share. We're going to look at everyone. I know that people have been really busy putting information in and comments in the chat, so we'll come on to that in just a moment. But what we are going to look at is working in partnership together and achieving better outcomes. That's the purpose of today. So do you remember at the beginning of the webinar, we looked at the 3 questions here about how do we ensure provision is sufficiently correct to meet the aspiration and needs of our young people and our learners? How do we enable and so we're able to prepare, plan, invest in provision and training? And how do we make sure that we've got them ready so that there's a transition in place? And I think Deborah's noted that as well just a moment ago. As anyone would like to speak and offer any comments, please? I know we've got some wonderful views in the chat here, but would anyone like to just come in and speak about how do we prepare from the earliest of years for better outcomes? So Helen, you've got a comment. Oh, Suzanne, you're coming in, I can just tell. So you'll be really helpful to be able to speak because you're from a local authority. So it'd be really good to hear your perspective because you're right in the middle of schools and colleges, aren't you? And about sharing information. So over to you for your views and thoughts, please.
So on a very high level, I totally agree with you, Elaine, first and foremost, that, you know, you're always learning more, and there were so many things that were insightful in both your set of slides, actually, that I was writing notes and thinking, God, I'd forgotten that. Oh, I must remember that. Actually, I hadn't made that link. So it's really useful, isn't it, to keep coming along to things and refreshing and making those networking connections. But we've just done in Essex, we're a large local authority. We've set up in quadrants. Some of our quadrants are sizes of local authority. So it's big, and the challenges are big as a barrier as much as it's an opportunity as well. So I don't see it as a negative. But we've just set up our SEND strategy for the next 5 years. And our strategy has made a point of going 0 to 25, but it's also made a couple of really bold statements in it. And one is, we're going to ensure that everything we do is equitable, inclusive, and ambitious. And I think that sings the messages we're trying to give in this as well, in our partnerships, and that all our partners are on that page with us. And then particularly for looking at post 16, but we call it My Life, My Opportunities, but those conversations need to happen much earlier. Likewise, we highlight planning for preparing for adulthood early. We also highlight the importance of high quality transition as well. And we don't believe we have the only role in that, preparing that transition. There's a lot of linkages that need to happen, and not just necessarily between provider, but also other services that we don't think is happening. We are very bold. I manage a target employment team, and one of my colleagues, my team here is Emma. So we make sure that we put preparing for employment at the front, not because we're ignoring all the other pathways, but we believe the skills you get for employment will cascade into the other 3 outcomes for adulthood. But so that people don't think we're ignoring the other outcomes, we also put meaningful opportunities beyond age 16, and that could be for our young people who may have to require those health or those day opportunity services going forward. So we've got quite an ambitious place, but what I guess I'd like to come back to is that provision is sufficient to meet aspirations and needs is also the place of like keeping up to pace with the landscape. So I have 8 FE colleges with satellite sites. There's 700 schools in Essex. Trying to keep up with the pace of all the changes that they're making is a really big task. So I think we set out in our SEND strategy that we have an underdeveloped post 16, the post 19 off. We put that straight out there because we're not saying it's not there, but we don't believe it's being maximised and optimised to the full extent that it can do because of lack of some of that joined up and linking between the different provisions. So totally agree with everything you say here. It's a big ask and it's a big challenge, but we're going to take away for us. We're and even though we're a well developed local authority and and have all our challenges and our successes, we're going back a page now, and we're going back to that start with that mapping and seeing what's there. But I bet you by the time we've done the mapping, it'll all changed again as well. So we have to find a system that allows us to bring that in place. So hopefully that's helpful as an overview of where.
Suzanne, that's been absolutely fabulous, and you've got Emma, who I'll bring in just a moment, who's been applauding you. I think I'll just bring in Helen first, as she had her hand up first, and then come back to you, Emma.
Yeah.
But just some comments, Suzanne, around there is a real focus on that, the quality of and that preparation from the earliest of years. So there's something around quality, making sure that it's really appropriate for your local area. And the skills bill and the act of just looking at your local skills to make sure that you're actually focused on those. So we can never think we've got it right and it stands still, because there's always something else and something new to do. And the FE sector is just going into planning season, so we should be looking at what needs are occurring now, and that's really integral of working with local authorities, with schools, to understand what the landscape is now to make those changes. You're absolutely right. Helen, can I bring you in, please?
Hi, yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. I lead a SEND transition team here in Central Manchester College. And we work, I just really would like to reflect some of what the last speaker just stated. You have to excuse me, I am in a shared office and I wasn't anticipating speaking. I work quite closely with the Northwest Network in FE and we, everything that's been discussed today is always high on our agenda. I think if there's one key message I was going to send out to schools is it very much depends on the size of the local area or authority that you're based in. So one key theme that comes up for us is that if you're one main provider for a set of schools in a rural area, it's more straightforward and much easier to share information and plan ahead because young people have less choice. I'm sure in Birmingham, London and other larger authorities where we're working with lots and lots of different schools such as Essex, it's a tough job. So each year we receive, say, 400 applicants for young people with education, health and care plans, and we have to triage that. And one key message I would say is that early planning that's required for young people with EHCPs. Unfortunately, they don't have the luxury of making a last minute decision. In year 11, in the summer holidays, they can apply for 2 or 3 colleges, but if they somewhere else is their primary choice, but they change their mind at the last minute, they may not get their primary choice because support has been fully assigned. And if colleges want to put or need to put more staff in place, they may have to put a bid in to their as part of their processes to request more staff. Then there's the HR process, which can take up to 3 months. So you could be looking between a 3 and 6 months process to get additional staffing for very specific needs. So that early transition planning, year 9, year 10, well before year 11 is key. And at one of our Northwest meetings yesterday, Warrington Borough Council were looking at asking for their schools, very much like that transition from primary to secondary, their preference schools, knowing much sooner to allow FE colleges to do effective planning and business planning, so planning for the young person and the business planning around that prior to the 31st of March. And that's a lot of work on you guys if that's left to the last minute in year 11. So year 9, year 10 are such key times, and we quite often can be involved. And the SEN Code of Practice states, good practice is to start in year 9 with the designated colleges to build on that and use creative options to engage young people with SEMH. So yeah, it's a big task and requires a lot of triage.
You've raised some really important points, and I'm so pleased that you've actually highlighted these. I mean, significantly, I don't know about you as a college, but our applications are in date order, so young people do need to apply as soon as possible, and even through a consultation process with an EHCP, that's still in date order. So if you've got an October or September, October, the year preceding when the students are going to start, that's the best opportunities, because otherwise if it's in the summer term, then it's really challenging, as you say, around support, around resourcing, just to make sure that there's effective resource support, effective transition is absolutely critical. So you've raised some really good points. I'm going to bring Emma in now, please. Emma, over to you.
Hi, thanks.
Just announce where you're from. Thank you.
From Essex County Council. I'm one of Suzanne's team, targeted employment. So I think the first thing I wanted to note was, I think it's really important that employment means something different to everybody. And I think for a lot of perhaps parents that think about their young person going into employment, if they have an additional need or send, they automatically assume it's got to be sort of what we would, think of, a career, full-time employment, and it is going to mean something different to everybody. So I think that's really important for us to, when we're working with individuals and with parents, that they recognise that, because it is going to be different, and actually it's got to be meaningful as well. So, and what is meaningful for one person isn't going to be for another. So that was the first thing I just really wanted to comment on. And vocational profiling, it's something we're really, really passionate about at Essex. We're trying to embed it in education. It's a prerequisite to all of the pathways that we work with. So supporting internships, accessible apprenticeships, traineeships, to make sure that we have matched those aspirations and with the talents and the attributes that young person's got. And we actually offer vocational profiling training to professionals, and that could be PFA workers, social workers, but also parents, carers, education, to really get the ball sort of, the momentum going on it. So yeah, the previous comments about vocational profile, I would absolutely, completely advocate, because it is just such an important thing.
And that's another really important point, and it was really refreshing to see that on Deborah's slides as well, because within the FE sector, we're and as a college, we're really strong on vocational profiling, and for you advocating for that as well. And I know other people on the FE sector on the call also advocate for vocational profile, because it actually just sets out the individual strengths and all of their attributes, doesn't it? And so that you can align work and develop skills alongside that. So that's really
and it's also
fabulous.
a really good way of getting that young person's voice heard, which I think is so important. And it can be quite uplifting to actually talk to them about what they can achieve and what they could do, because quite often I think the aspirations of young people can be quite low, and they shouldn't be. So
very well said, Emma. Thank you so much for coming in on the conversation there. That's really great. Let's move on to the next slide. I think what I wanted to highlight here really is about effective practice, and what we know that happens at year 11 and year 10, but a lot of focus, and we've all been talking about actually planning from the earliest of years. And I really, the video that Deborah shared a little while ago about what I want to do when I grow up. So we are talking from the earliest of years, but for here, the aspiration of planning from year 9, when we're looking at EHCP annual reviews, or those without a plan, their intent for employment, and thinking about their aspirations, and as Emma's described, making sure that that it's actually what they really want to do, that their voice is heard, that skills are matched, and thinking about their future aspirations, and that their relevance to them. So some indicators there. I won't go through all of these, but it's actually really important that it's what really matters to the individual, having those high aspirations. And I think significantly that I've taken from today, when Deborah was talking about not information, advice and guidance, it's about careers, it's about actually what our children and young people want to do as a career, and how that impacts on them individually. And then some guidance on what we need to think about at year 10 and year 11. And I also thought it was really significant about those 4 to 6 touch point and encounters with FE. So that has to happen throughout that year 9, 10 and 11 process, to ensure that there is good thought and consideration for next steps. So I've got some questions for you here, which I will leave out for us to have a look at, but some reflections and some actions. So we've got a little bit of time. So what do we think are the main concerns and issues for co-working between schools and colleges? So something, if any of you have any views on that, just to come in and speak about that in just a moment. How are you working strategically together? I would be really interesting to understand that. How do you ensure that reviews are impactful to inform learners' next steps in their preparation for adulthood? How do you work together to input on reviews? As an FE sector, how are we attending college, school reviews? You know, we've got 750 students here currently with education, health and care plans, so that's a real challenge. So how can I ensure that I understand all of our students moving forward with their annual reviews and their aspirations for FE? How do we work with our local schools and local authorities to make sure that there is effective support planning for our learners with high needs? And how do we know which learners are likely to come to our provision? We might be, you know, they might put an application in, they might, we might be consulted, but how can we ensure that actually they're attending here in the autumn term, and to make sure that we've got the right support in place? So what will we do as a result today? What's your pledge? Have you got any views on those reflections? Anyone? I know we've talked quite a bit, but it'd be really interesting to hear any other thoughts. Deborah,
Elaine,
I wonder if yes.
Yeah, I was just going to chip in. One of the things around number one, which is the co-working between schools and colleges, that is a continual bugbear really, is the changes in staffing that there often are in the people who are involved in transition. And there are always very committed colleagues who can make very good relationships with either their college or school contemporaries, and work well together. But very often those relationships are to some extent disturbed or changed by people leaving. And I just wonder whether anybody's got anything like a protocol or a set of arrangements that they have in case these break down, and ways in which you can still contact each other even if a key person does leave. I think there are some protocols around, but I'd be really pleased to hear if anybody's got anything like that they've got in place that works.
I think it's a really good challenge, and it always, you know, good partnership does come down to people, doesn't it? And you know, and I know it's about a culture and the way of working, but it does come down to those people. And when they leave, things can, you know, the wheels can fall off, and you think, oh, actually, that was working really well, and then somebody moves on. For us on our website, we've got a key contact as a local office, so it's a mailbox rather than a person, because I heard you say early on, if you've got a main contact as a marketing person, that's not who you actually need to get to be able to speak to as far as a specific department. So that works well for us. And I always make sure that on all of our literature and information that goes out to schools or to parents, I'm always checking that number to make sure that it doesn't go through to someone, that there is a general number that I know that will go through, because that's also an issue as well. And they say, oh no, I'm not in this role anymore, or no, that person left. So I think that's, for consistency, that's our way of working. I don't know if anyone else has got any views on that. Any thoughts on working effectively together and some of the points that have been raised? I think there's some great comments from the local authority. Thank you, Essex, for coming in on the call about your when you're thinking about having those high aspirations and what your plan is for the next 5 years. And I think it's really important to make sure you've got that really effective working with your local authority to really help with that phase transfer, and to take responsibility for that, rather than thinking actually it's the LO's responsibility. Actually it's a coordinated approach and joint responsibility. So I think that's something that's worked really well for us. whether you're in Norfolk or Essex or anywhere else in the country.
There's also, I think, Elaine, the issue of the larger numbers coming through the system, both in terms of young people with plans and those who need additional support and are on SEN support. And it will be interesting to see what the government's response to the SEND review, which they're supposed to be publishing this month, aren't they? What they're going to say about that, because that did seem to be one of the key issues, was that the SEND support designation was not actually getting the right support in the right place for young people. And so actually that seems to me that's a large body of young people who are currently being significantly underserved. And I know that the EHCP doesn't guarantee you the kind of support that you would like, but that whole area, I think, when we get the review response, there should be some better thinking around how that is managed.
Well, for us as a college, I know that we've got to do a lot more work on the graduated approach, Deborah. There is where we've as a resource, so that we are upskilling our workforce, where you're looking at making sure that all learners are treated as individuals and making reasonable adjustments, because that's what you would expect beyond college when you're looking at employment, when you're looking at reasonable adjustments. So we need to lead by example with that, and so that there is that universal approach of, and the graduated approach of, all should expect, and then the some, and then the few. So some might have additional resource, shared support, and then the few would have one-to-one high needs. I know that will form part of the next steps, and some of the key messages, and I know as a whole, with schools and with colleges, we've all got a part to play in that, and I know that that's an area of focus for us as a provider. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. And there's and I think, as Essex has talked a little while ago, you don't stand still. There's always something else to do when you're looking at achieving high quality and making it improvements. So I hope as a result today that people will think about making a pledge and actually look and take responsibility for partnership working. I would like to sincerely thank you for all of you that have come on the call and made your comments and shared your views. I would like to sincerely thank Deborah Dent from Whole School Send for coming on and joining the webinar, and it's been really insightful for me. So I've got some things to think about and to take away. It just goes to show it's good to communicate, and partnership working is key. So I thank you for today, and we will share the slides directly after the session. And thank you very much, and see you again soon.